They say the Eldar see fate as a thread, a line already woven, a scream already heard. But even they, who walk between seconds, refuse to look at what lies beyond the end. Not the final battle, not the last death, but what happens after, when the last Monkey war machine groans to silence, when the warp finally stopped screaming, and the last soul flickers out like a dying lumen lamp in the ruins of an abandoned shrine world. What then? It is not destruction the Eldar fear. They have mastered that. It is not extinction, they rehearse that in dreams. What haunts them is something worse, something deeper, a silence so complete it bends time around it, an end that does not allow mourning because nothing remains to do the mourning. No spirit stones, no exarchs, no lament, no whisper, just stillness. And yet, they saw it, once, in a cracked artifact older than their oldest bones, and they have been hiding it ever since. Before we dive into that nightmare, one reminder. Like the half-remembered warnings in a harlequin's mask, your support keeps the story moving forward. Like, share, and subscribe. For what comes next will not wait, and neither will the ones trying to stop it. The child first heard it in the silence between the shrines. It was not a sound, not really. Not like the hiss of grab plates or the distant moan of wraithbone expanding through the hull. It was beneath sound, like the echo of something that hadn't happened yet. Her name was Aeliel, too young to walk the paths, too old to be ignored. Her steps echoed through the twilight halls of Craftworlds Simnia, a vessel that once held millions and now carried fewer than 10,000. The air tasted of copper and incense. The walls wept condensation like quiet tears. She pressed her palm against the column. The vibration was steady now, soft, patient, like something waiting to be remembered. Spirit stones embedded along the arch began to quiver, not from proximity to death, but as if pulled by a tide none could see. Aeliel did not call for help. She did not speak. Children on Semnea learned early that speaking truths too soon only earned silence in return. She just watched as one of the stones, an ancient relic untouched since before the fall began, to glow faintly blue. When the seers finally came, they did not speak to her. They stood in a circle around the chamber's edge, robes heavy with dust, wraithbone staves held close like crutches. They did not ask questions. They closed their eyes and began the ritual of unseeing. It was not divination, it was erasure. To see too far was dangerous, but to see what was missing, that was worse. No recent deaths, no psychic disturbances, no warp bleed. The runes told them nothing, only the bones spoke. And what they whispered was not prophecy, it was absence. Farseer Taloneth was the last to speak. Her voice was a dry rasp, unused for years. "It is not arrival," she said. "It is not a soul returning." Her fingers hovered above a stone that pulsed in triplets, like a heartbeat dreaming of another body. "It is something forgetting to arrive." The child was led away gently, her fingers still humming days later. The Medicae said there was no trace of trauma, but when the healing trance was offered, she refused. She didn't want to forget. She had heard something the others hadn't, not in the vibration itself, but in the silence that followed. A silence that shaped space like a blade. She began drawing patterns with her food, spirals within spirals, always opening outward, never closing. In the wraithbone chambers deep below the helm spires, the bone singers began to panic. Not with fear, with confusion. The wraithbone was shifting by itself, growing nodes, curling away from contact, like it was recoiling from its own lattice. One singer reported hearing words emerge from the resonance, not spoken, unspoken, as if the craftworld itself was trying to remember what it had once been made to forget. For centuries, Simnia had drifted alone, far from the major webway junctions, forgotten by the great councils, too damaged to join any war, too stubborn to die. Its populace had narrowed over time, painters, poets, Eldar, too weary for war, but not yet ready for the grave. It had become a place of quietude, of soft endings. But now, doors long sealed were opening. Not with ceremony, but with necessity. The bones wanted them opened. At the center of the ship stood the Hall of Echoes, where the oldest spirit stones were mounted, their voices long faded to near nothing. They did not speak anymore, not even to the most powerful seers. But this time, they sang. One note, sustained, long, deeper than hearing, felt through bone marrow, carried through breath, and every Eldar aboard heard it. Taloneth convened the conclave of sightless hours. The gathering had not met in centuries. Each Farseer arrived in silence, robes gray from isolation. They did not bow. They did not smile. They began to speak in gestures, in shared thought, in runes cast not onto tables, but onto memory itself. The consensus came quickly. Something beneath causality had moved, not forward, not back, sideways. In the records of the fall, there were mentions of dissonant vibrations, the kind heard just before the psychic scream of she who thirsts tore reality. Those tones were violent, panicked, but this hum was calm, calculated, as if welcomed, not by the Eldar, but by the bones. Eliel was not permitted to attend, but she stood outside the chamber, unmoving, for hours. Then, without command, she turned and walked into the lower halls, areas sealed, since the war in heaven was still a story, whispered to frightened children. Doors unlatched at her presence. Lights flickered on, not from power, but from memory. She was not guided, she was expected. In a chamber with no name, she found a dais, carved not by hand, but by forgetting. The stone atop it bore no sigils. No soul rested in it. It had never held a name, and yet it pulsed the same rhythm as the others. Faster now, urgent. The bones do not lie, they do not dream, they remember, and now, something had taught them to forget. That was the only conclusion the conclave could agree on. Not a force of warp, not a Xeno's weapon, something subtractive, a force that did not kill but erased the potential to have ever been. Taloneth finally broke protocol and asked the child what she had heard. Eliel looked up with eyes that did not match her age and spoke only once. It is not death, it is not void. It is when even death forgets your name. The chamber fell into silence, but the bones did not. The hum grew louder. Eliel stopped sleeping like other children, not because of nightmares, but because she began waking to memories no one else had. The Medicae called them hallucinations. The seers called them omens. The bones said nothing but vibrated when she passed, as if recognizing their own past futures tangled in her presence. In her dreams, Semnaya was already gone, not destroyed. It drifted through the void like a concept half-erased mid-sentence. She would walk its corridors and dream, run her hands over walls that didn't exist anymore, whisper names that hadn't been born yet. The most terrifying thing wasn't the silence. It was the absence of decay, as if even entropy had been overridden. She told no one at first. But the dreams grew stronger, more vivid. Time inside them folded, bled backward. She remembered a room she would later enter, filled with sigils she had not yet drawn. She could describe voices of those not yet dead. Her breath carried echoes of unsaid words. Eventually, the seers took her from her quarters, not gently, not cruelly, just with the resigned reverence reserved for those who had already outlived their purpose. They placed her in the chamber of the unseen, where no path is walked, where the walls are neither light nor shadow, but a material grown from sheer forgetting. She was surrounded by runes designed to suppress false prophecy, to dull the minds of the unstable. But the runes did not dim her visions. They screamed. Every night, she saw more. Not battles, not betrayals, but collapse. Not of a people, of concepts. She saw language dissolve, words peeling from their meanings like wet paint from rusted holes. The word Eldar cracked into dust. The word soul turned to vapor. When the Farseers entered, they found her already awake, staring at a wall that now bore a spiral none could erase. Drawn with her fingernail, a pattern seen before only once in the sealed records of the Black Library. The shape was not dangerous. It was precedent. The last time it had appeared, a Craftworld had vanished between seconds, not destroyed. Removed, she had no training, no communion with Wraithbone, no psychic markers of note. Yet the Incarn took notice, a whisper across the void between life and death, a slow draw of silence where there should have been longing. Yvraine, High Priestess of the Ynnead, dreamed of a girl she had never met, standing before the shattered gate of souls, not opening it, closing it. The image came again and again, always the same girl, always backward, always after the end. Messages were sent, couriers vanished. The webway refused to carry thought where Eliel stood. Even the Harlequins felt it. Their performances stumbled, their masks warped mid-dance. The Laughing God's narrative, always flexible, began to fray at the edges. Then came the visit. He had no mask. That was the first warning. The Harlequin stepped from a rift that did not hum, did not pulse. It simply was. His colors did not shift. They dulled as he entered. His name was Veshmal, not a name from the Codex, a forgotten one. His steps were not rehearsed. His voice was not dramatic. He simply sat, knees crossed, before Eliel and said, "The joke has run backward. You are the punchline, and the setup has not happened yet." She did not blink. "I remember you not arriving." He froze. That night, the Craftworld shuddered, not from fire, not from impact, but from withdrawal. One corridor, once home to a meditation chamber, simply ceased to be. The wall was smooth, seamless. The room had never existed, and yet everyone remembered it. Alaya wept for hours, not from fear, but from recognition. "That was where I will have died," she whispered. Taloneth summoned the conclave again, but this time the discussion was brief. They could no longer contain the event, not with Seer, not with exile. Alaya was no longer a child, not in purpose, perhaps not even in biology. The spiral on the wall had begun to grow, not with paint, with absence. It etched itself by unmaking material. Even stasis fields failed to preserve the wall's edge. They disintegrated when aimed too closely. Nothing remained, not even failure. The Incarn itself descended, not physically. It could not. Simnaya was too fragile, too old, but its voice arrived, through the bones, through the stones. Through Elial. At midnight, the spirit stones began to flicker, not vibrate, like dying stars in sync. The hum returned, deeper now. Then Elial opened her mouth and spoke in 3 voices. None of them hers. The first was male, Eldar young. I remember her death as if it never was. The second was genderless, hollow. The moment of non-arrival is approaching. The third was hers. Clear, do not let the soul stone remember me. And then, silence. The spiral stopped growing. The bones stilled. The gate beneath the Craftworld, an ancient webway, not long thought, inert, witched open by a width no wider than a breath. Veshmal vanished that night. His mask was found, half melted, in the chamber where the girl had spoken. But there were no signs of struggle, only a new spiral, etched inside the mask's forehead by morning. Eliel no longer responded to her name. She began speaking only in "If I was," she would say. "Had I not been," she'd whisper. Her presence warped causality in small, untraceable ways. Messages delivered before they were sent. A broken vase, suddenly unbroken, yet dripping. The last act of the conclave was to send a fragment of her memory to the Black Library. Not her mind, a copy of a dream she hadn't had yet. Encrypted, then hidden behind runes that responded only to laughter. The Keeper of Secrets who received it never opened the message. He burned it immediately, then took his own name from the registry and vanished. Alile continued to dream, but now the dreams were not just in reverse. They were folding inward, past, future, never, and all of them ended the same way, with no one left to remember the dream had happened at all. They called him Wraith, before names mattered. The mask of the Lament Mirage once sent him to die 1,000 times in 1,000 ways, and he returned from each mask untouched, laugh unbroken. His step was the rhythm of mockery, his blade the punctuation of cosmic cruelty. Wraith did not perform to entertain, he performed to wound. The enemy, yes, but also the idea that fate was inescapable. Each pirouette across battlefields mocked Slaanesh, mocked death, mocked the idea that the Eldar had lost. He was the punchline to extinction itself. Then, one performance ended differently. It was to be a reenactment of the fall, staged on a ruined Exodite moon, for no audience but memory. The players moved through their roles, warrior, prophet, goddess, betrayer, until Wraith entered as the fool, the moment of laughter amid lament. He raised his hand for the first line, and stopped. He did not forget the words. He did not miss the cue. He stood in stillness, hand halfway raised, as if memory itself had turned to rust inside his bones. The audience fellow Harlequins only held their breath. One stepped forward to prompt him. Then Wraith screamed. It wasn't a sound of pain. It was a reversal. Like his body was being pulled through time in the wrong direction. Every bone scraping against the story he had just tried to speak. His mask split down the center, not cracked, but unmade. Fabric turned to dust. Sigils unraveled. When he fell, he was naked of story, stripped of identity, his laugh replaced by one sentence, spoken over and over in a voice that did not rise. Do not open the gate beneath Aeldari. No one moved, because no one remembered that name. Aeldari had not been spoken aloud in 10 millennia, not by Eldar, not by Eldar, not even in the quiet ledger rituals of the Black Library. It was not forbidden, it was empty, a city burned from both reality and remembrance. And yet here was a Harlequin, one of the laughing gods, chosen, dragged back from unknowing to utter it with the clarity of prophecy. They tried to restore his mask. No spirit stone would bind, no ink would stain. He refused the rites, refused the dances. He walked away from the mask in silence. Not rogue, unwritten Wraith, was not exiled. He simply could not be followed. From Exodite moons to Comorite shadow bazaars, his presence began to ripple. The Drukhari avoided him, not out of fear but instinct. Like he triggered a genetic memory of failure. Even the homunculi would not approach. One who tried to dissect him found his blades reversed, cut by his own incisions. Before the first incision was made, Wraith never attacked, never ran. He simply arrived in places he should not be, places whose coordinates had long been lost. Derelict webway junctions, shard worlds shattered in the war in heaven. He would sit for hours, speaking the same sentence into walls that no longer listened. Do not open. The gate beneath Aeldari. One of the Shadow Seers followed him. Her name was Sylvain, a cartographer of forgotten pain. She did not confront him. She observed, took notes, compared paths, and came to one conclusion. He was retracing something, not a route, not a memory, a warning loop. Each place he visited had once intersected with Aeldari through microfractures in webway geometry. Before the fall, before the city was lost. The trouble was, Aeldari was not destroyed in the fall. Records from the pre-fall era, when cross-Craftworld diplomacy still functioned, mention Aeldari as a node city, not large, not powerful, just precise, a place for the weaving of minor time, a garden of potential. Its function was metaphysical, its existence. That made its disappearance even stranger. Sylvain sent word to the Black Library, but what returned was not sanction. It was amnesia. Her message was marked unreadable by the library's sentience. When she reviewed her own copy, half the characters had reversed. Dates were listed in negative solar years. The name Aeldari had become a symbol, an inverted rune that shifted shape when looked at too long. Wraith kept walking. He stopped speaking the phrase aloud. Instead, he began painting it, not in ink, in absence. Entire corridors darkened in its wake. Pick screens ceased to register his presence. Those who tried to record him found their files corrupted not by deletion, but by linguistic collapse. Their devices began displaying glyphs from languages not yet invented. Then came the event, on a minor, Craftworld fragment, orbiting a dead star. A gate opened. No one built it. No runes marked it. It did not pulse. It simply was, and from it came nothing. Not silence, not death, not warp, just a flattening. A corridor went blank, not exploded, not burned, just ceased. As if someone had edited the space out of time and forgot to reinsert the gap. Wraith appeared hours later, dragging behind him a length of wraith bone that wept static. He held it like a corpse, not of a person, of a place. The spiral was seen again, not painted, not carved, grown into the wall behind him as he stood, unmoving, staring into space, no longer present. Sylvain approached. Slowly, she reached for his shoulder. Tell me what Aeldari was. Wraith turned. For the first time, his eyes were visible, hollow, endless, not mad deliberate. Aeldari was the gate. She blinked, and the key. He looked down at the fragment of wraith bone, now bleeding from seams that had not been there seconds ago, and the lock. He smiled then, not the harlequin's grin, not Sigarach's smirk, a child's smile, and we already opened it, backwards. Then he disappeared. No warp signature, no gate flash, no residue, just a soft tremor that ran through the webway and made one truth clear. Aeldari had not been destroyed, it had opened itself. There are shrines the Ynnead never touched, not for lack of trying, but because something in the wraithbone refused them. Sanctuaries where the bones curled inward, folding like fingers protecting a wound that still bled. The shrine at Vilethkor was one such place, marked on no star map, drifted beyond the light of any system. It moved, slowly, not with engines, but with memory. A world fragment with no tether, dragged through the void by the gravitational pull of something it refused to name. When the Ynnead first approached, they found the surface barren. No defenses, no warning systems, no sentience. Only a single spire visible from orbit, half submerged in obsidian dust. They sent a small team, 3 seers, 2 bladesingers, and 1 autarkic observer. Only one message ever came back, not encrypted, not verbal, just a psychic pulse, deep, slow, and wrong. It was shaped like a word, but contained none, something between negation and invitation. The team was never recovered. Centuries passed. The Ynnead called the mission corrupted. The shrine was labeled sleeping in the ledger, not forbidden, not sealed, just uninterred, until now. Taloneth knew the name Vila, not from maps, but from dreams. It had surfaced in Eliel's reverse speech. Once, while under trance, the girl had whispered, "The sword that sleeps behind the breath of morning." That phrase appeared in no canon text, but the correlation was too precise to ignore, and the hum had returned different this time, lower, singular, centered on a direction that led only one place. Vilethka, Semnaya, shifted its course. The journey took weeks. Every step toward the shrine made the bones heavier, not physically, but emotionally. Eldar across the Craftworld began experiencing recursive grief, mourning for things they had not lost. One warrior wept for a brother who had never existed. A bone singer broke her fingers, sculpting a face she didn't know. Taloneth herself dreamed of a child born in fire, who died before she could cry out and woke with a name in her mouth that faded before breath. When they arrived, The spire looked unchanged, still silent, still half-buried, but the hum grew deafening the moment they stepped onto the surface, not through ears, through marrow. Alio walked first. No order, no ceremony. The dust recoiled from her feet. The spire opened. Inside was not architecture. It was memory rendered in shape. Columns curled with despair. Doors breathed slowly. Light moved in patterns that mirrored heartbeat arrhythmia. The team followed the child down steps that had never been climbed, because they were never meant to be. At the base, a single vault, not locked, not guarded, but weeping. Wraithbone walls formed a cage not around an object, but around an absence. The floor bore a sigil one none recognized until Alio spoke. The sword that wept before the fall, the final crone. Sword had never been lost. It had been hidden from itself. Inside the vault, not a blade, a seed, oblong, dull, the color of dried blood in dim light. It pulsed, not with power, but mourning. When Taloneth reached toward it, her staff shattered, not violently, apologetically. The act of touching was violation, not by taboo, but by regret. Wraith appeared again, unheralded, his mask still gone, his clothes now colorless, drained of pigment like memories exposed to too much void. He stepped forward and, for the first time since his scream, whispered something new. It is not a weapon. It is the reason the others became weapons. They understood then. The crone. Swords were never meant to be wielded. They were symptoms. Each blade forged after this one was a reflection, a distortion of this first sorrow made manifest. The other swords were grief externalized, rage sharpened. But this was what remained when rage was gone. When mourning outlasted memory, Taloneth asked, "What is it, mourning?" Wraith closed his eyes. The question. She paused. Not the answer. He opened his palms. There was no answer, only silence. That is why it must never be drawn. Aliel stepped forward. She did not speak. She felt. Her hands hovered above the seed. The pulsing slowed, then stopped. Not dead, listening. A vision passed through them all, not with words, but sensation. A galaxy before shape, before gods, before names. Not peace, not chaos, just potential. And in that potential, a thought. What happens if something asks a question the universe refuses to answer? Not out of cruelty, out of inability. That was Alkara's gate. Not a location, a concept. The seed was the key, forged from that moment. And it had been buried, not to hide it, but to let the question die unasked. The vault began to shift, not crumble, retreat. The walls moved inward, not to trap, but to withdraw the concept from reality. It had been seen. That was enough. The moment was folding again. Aliel turned. The gate is not a path. It is a riddle, the kind that answers by erasing the one who asked. The seed shimmered. The spiral appeared again, etched into the air itself. Taloneth whispered, "If this predates the gods, what made it?" No one answered. Not Wraith, not Elial, not even the bones. Because some questions are not unanswered. They are unanswerable. And now, the universe remembered that it had once tried and failed. The tale begins not in performance, but in aftermath. The mask of the severed veil had finished their final act on a planet whose name no longer matters. Maiden world long since bled dry of spirit, of purpose, of past. The audience was ash, the air, radioactive memory. But the Harlequins danced anyway, for the story demands it. The fool arrived last, not as comic relief, but as mirror. And then, he collapsed, a solitaire, masked, silent, untouched by Slaanesh, not through denial, but through proximity so close to the abyss that even she who thirsts turns away. This one had no name recorded, only the rune for recursive endings. He had walked the webway alone for centuries, a messenger between lies. a vessel for truths too dangerous to wear a name. His body did not break. It folded, not in pain, but like a character written out of a script mid-sentence. The others moved to help. He rose before they touched him, bloodless, breathless. His first death had already occurred. This was something else. He walked into Camorra the next day. No one walks into Camorra unannounced. The gates did not resist. The spires trembled, but did not fire. And in the district of Keldrez, beneath the surgical gardens of Homunculus Varnaxel, the flayed, the solitaire stopped moving, not collapsed, not captured, delivered. Varnaxel watched from the ceiling. He had harvested emotion for amusement. He had dissected pain for flavor. He had never feared anything with a soul. The solitaire turned to him and smiled, but there was no joke in the curve of his mouth, only collapse. He said one word, laugh, then he died. No blood, no light, no scream, just sudden entropy. His body dissolved into narrative memories, collapsing into dust that smelled of wraithbone and old perfume. But not before one final image burned itself into Varnaxel's mind. See, the laughing god, standing still, no mask, no motion, eyes wide, not in laughter, but in betrayal. Varnaxel hasn't spoken since, not from trauma, from certainty. He sealed his own mouth shut with soul thread and carved the solitaire's rune into his own forehead. He walks now in silence, tracing symbols on walls, drawing the spiral in places only the desperate go. His creations rot mid-birth. His clone vats collapse. The other homunculi watch from afar, unsure if he has gone mad or finally seen something worth fearing. The mask tried to recover the remains. There were none, but they found a trace of thought sealed in crystal, hidden behind a laugh line etched into the solitaire's abandoned mask. Not data, emotion. A confession broadcast only to those who knew the cadence of Sigarach's breath. The message is incomplete, fragmented. But this much is clear. The laughing god is afraid, not of Slaanesh, not of the end, but of a joke he did not write. The Harlequins are actors, but actors need a script, and the masks have always claimed that their tales of the fall, of the war in heaven, of the Rana Dandra war, handed down by Sigarach himself, passed through visions, through dance, through madness. But the scripts have changed. Rituals that once brought catharsis now end in silence. Masks that once shimmered with illusion now display truths without meaning. The stories are not decaying, they are looping, repeating but skewed, punchlines reversed, ironies hollowed. The Rana Dandra is performed before its cause. The fall is mourned before the hubris that birthed it is shown. The players forget their cues. The audience forgets they weep. And Sigarach does not correct them, because he can't. The library keepers of the mask found a text, hidden in the base of a harlequin's blade, words, etched by vibration alone, visible only when read aloud in reverse. The text speaks of a time before performance, before mocking the gods, before the dance. It speaks of a room, empty, white dot, no dimensions, no walls, just potential, and within it, a smile. Not Sigarach's, older, wider, .a. Smile that needed a story to hide inside, so it invented a god who laughed, and Sigarach was born, not from belief, not from chaos, from containment. The joke was the only prison strong enough to hold it. But now, the prison is breaking. The webway fractures, not from warp breach, not from structural decay, from narrative collapse. There are places where the dance no longer loops, where steps dissolve into static, where harlequins forget who they are, mid-performance, and vanish before applause. The webway's corridors twist into spirals, then knots, then absence. The last performance of the severed veil ended not with a bow, but with every player speaking the same line in unison. The question has escaped, and then they vanished. Only their masks remained. Taloneth heard of it days later. Not from the mask, who would never admit failure, but from a cracked soul stone left in the ruins of a dead moon court, where a performance was scheduled and never held. The stone contained a whisper, one word, spoken in terror, spoken as truth. Sigurach, not screamed. Begged. Eliel, upon hearing it, drew the spiral again, this time inside a mirrored chamber. The spiral reflected endlessly, becoming unreadable. Then the mirrors cracked, not from pressure, from rejection. She spoke once, to herself, to the reflection that no longer followed her movements. He was never laughing. Outside, the bones began to hum again, but this time, they wept between the notes. It began in silence. That was the first warning. The gate at Rantor had functioned for millennia without failure, carved into the bones of a mountain on an Exodite world. It was a quiet artery, not a major junction, but a thread in the larger web, stable, ritual-bound, left untouched by war and remembered only by path. One of those was Selienin, Exodite ranger, born beneath red skies, trained in quiet steps, taught to track movement, not of bodies, but of thought. He knew the sound of wraithbone breathing. He knew the pulse of gates opening. He knew, above all, the difference between danger and change. On that day, he felt neither. He felt nothing. Selien was walking the ridge above the gate's surface platform when it happened. The usual hum of the portal was there, steady, old, like the breath of something dreaming beneath the stone. He paused, reached for his lungs, not in fear, in habit. Then the hum stopped, not faded, not dimmed, stopped, mid-step, mid-thought, mid-breath. He stumbled, fell to his knee, looked toward the gate. It was still open, but it was wrong. The shimmer had inverted. Its edges no longer rippled. They curved inward, folding light in patterns that hurt to remember. Not to see. He could still see the shape, but the memory of it twisted, like trying to recall a name written in smoke. Then came the silence. It didn't descend. It arrived. All birdsong ended. Wind paused mid-gust. Even the sound of Celian's own breath seemed detached, distant, like he'd stepped half out of his own body. And then the gate folded, not collapsed, folded, like parchment crumpling itself from within. There was no light, no sound, just absence. The entire structure seemed to fold inward into a space that did not lead anywhere. Not even the warp. Celian ran. When he reached the tree line, he turned back once. The gate was gone. The mountain was intact, the stone undisturbed, but the memory of the gate no longer aligned with the land around it, like it had been erased, and reality hadn't caught up yet. He sent a message through ancient runes, warning the nearest Craftworld of the event. No response. 3 days later, he felt it again, far away. A tremor, not physical. A friction between possibilities, as if a story had reached its ending but continued to be read. Craftworld Therial responded first. They sent a seer team to investigate the Rantor coordinates. Celian waited at the perimeter. He watched them arrive, 7 figures in pale robes. He heard their introductions. Then, mid-sentence, one of them vanished, not blinked away. Not rifted. Removed. The remaining 6 froze. The air around them flattened, not grew heavy. Flattened, like depth itself was being erased. One turned to speak. The word caught in her throat and fell out of her mouth in pieces. Not syllables, shapes. The seers dropped their staves. The runes etched into their armor, flickered, then reversed. The spiral appeared again, curling inward, eating itself. One screamed, then went silent halfway through, not dead, gone. Celian watched 5 more vanish. The last fell to her knees. He stepped forward, despite every instinct, screaming in the language of his blood. She looked at him with eyes unlit. Her mouth opened, and she whispered, "It's not the warp. It's not a place. It's a choice, unmade." Then she collapsed. Her body crumbled not in decay, in incompletion, her bones unformed, her robes Celian reached for her sword. It disintegrated in his hand. He ran again, this time farther, off-world, into the deep forest caves, where his ancestors had carved dreams into stone. He did not call for help. He called for memory, and the stones remembered. Briefly, they showed him a fragment of an age, when gates were not tools, but thresholds between states. Not here and there, but was and wasn't. Ulkari had once overseen them all, and it had made a mistake. One gate was asked a question it could not answer, and in trying, it learned how to forget. Now that forgetting spreads, not through war, through unbeing, the Ynnead sent scouts. None returned. The Drukhari avoided the region altogether. A Void Watcher from Bealton passed nearby and began speaking in static before self-terminating mid-transmission. His final words scrambled into spirals of punctuation. The Black Library received fragments of thoughts suggesting that the gate was not localized, that the absence had spread backward. Some claimed the gate never existed. Others remembered passing through it centuries ago. Celian remained, not out of bravery, out of proximity. Something in him had been tagged. He could no longer enter the webway, not even through other gates. They rejected him not violently, gently, like a door refusing to open for a name it does not recognize. He wandered until the child found him, Eli Al. She walked into his camp without sound, without trail. Sat beside him, said nothing, but the spiral glowed faintly across her palm. He looked at her and knew she had seen beyond the fold. He asked what was on the other side. She shook her head, not in refusal. In correction, there was no other side. He asked, then what opened? She touched the ground. The grass withered beneath her fingertips, and whispered, the moment before a question is asked. The webway did not fracture like glass, it cracked like bone, because something inside it had been alive, and now, it was trying to forget it ever was. There are shelves in the Black Library that do not cast shadows, not because of light, because of refusal. Along these shelves are volumes bound, not in hide, nor bone, nor thought, but in decisions that were never made. Books that breathe, scrolls that unwrite themselves when described. Only a handful are sealed behind the runes of refusal, and only one is both sealed and forgotten. It has no title, no author. It writes itself backward. It bleeds. They call it the Null Codex, and they sent a warlock to destroy it. Her name was Cyrell. Not young, not particularly ambitious. Chosen precisely because she had never asked too many questions. She followed the paths cleanly. She broke no rituals. She was not exceptional, which meant she was stable. She was not told what the book was, only that it must not remain. She entered the library through a node sealed centuries, opened only by command from the oldest of the Shadow Sea. The corridor led down, then sideways, then backward, through time literally, as the runes on her staff began to shift to prior forms of themselves, the deeper she went. When she reached the cell, it was empty, not vacant, unmade, a room-shaped space where nothing settled. The codex lay on a pedestal that didn't support it. It hovered just enough to make doubt permanent. She reached for it. It bled, not onto her hand since them. A thin line of memory pierced her fingers, dripping sensation into her veins. Not ink, not pain, recollection. She remembered touching it before. She remembered refusing to. She remembered burning it. She remembered fleeing from it in a battle that never happened, on a craft world that never existed, screaming a name she could no longer pronounce, but still feared. Cyrell froze. The codex opened itself. The text moved right to left, symbols shifting through half-familiar alphabets, then reversed Eldarith, then something older, something that felt like a whisper inside bone. Her eyes watered, not from effort, from mourning. She began to read. The codex wept. Every page turned with breath. Each symbol she understood, she forgot. Each one she didn't, remembered her. Names she had never spoken echoed through her ears, in voices not her own. At one point, she heard Eliel's laughter, but backward like the memory of a joke that was never funny, only preventative. The room dimmed as the codex continued to open, not physically, but emotionally. Pages unfolding through her expectation. Her pulse began sinking with the book's bleeding. The text wrapped itself into her perception. One line stood out. "You were not supposed to see this again." And then another. "The spiral knows your name." She closed it. But the room did not change. The codex did not resist. It simply stared back. She tried to summon fire. Nothing happened. She tried to banish thought. Her thoughts grew louder. She tried to scream, and the book screamed for her. From the corners of the library, librarians came, not with weapons, but with mirrors, not to contain her, but to separate her reflection. They forced her to look at herself through 3 panes, each angled to distort memory differently. In one reflection, she was Ashdod. In another, she was a child. In the third, she was Wrath, smiling with no lips. The mirrors cracked. They pulled her from the room, leaving the codex untouched, because it had already left something in her. Back in containment, the runes would not bind. Her soul stone turned opaque, not corrupted, just blank. Her dreams began to leak. Librarians walking nearby reported remembering futures not their own. One claimed she whispered in her sleep. "The question is walking now." She was asked repeatedly. What she read, she never answered, not out of secrecy, out of irrelevance. The codex did not tell her something. It used her to rehearse. 1. Harlequin was sent to speak to her. Sylvain. She entered the cell wearing 3 masks, layered joy, grief, and silence. Sorel looked up, and without prompting said, "It remembers us better than we remember ourselves." Suelvain nodded. "And what does it want?" Cyril shook her head. "It doesn't want. It waits." The codex was returned to the shelf, but it had already rewritten its catalog listing. A new entry appeared. Alkari. C. Nonlinear absence event. C. Spiral event. Horizon. C. Sigarach's failed containment. The Black Library does not make errors. It had not included Alkari before. Now it did. And Werset had listed it in the past tense, as if remembering something that should never have existed. A final note was found on Sorel's skin, etched into her palm, in a language the Bonesingers refused to translate. But the translation had already been found, written inside. Wraith's last performance mask. A single phrase, the question that cannot be held. The codex remained sealed, but not silent. It hums, now, very faintly, in rhythm with the bones, and sometimes, when no one is near, it opens on its own, not forward, not backward, but inward. Farseer. Ilranus had been blind since the moment of his ascension, not from injury, not from punishment, from choice. He claimed the warp spoke too loudly through vision, that the skeins of fate wrapped around color, form, and shape like threads around bone. So he severed them, sealed his eyes with molten wraith wax, and walked into prophecy with nothing but breath and vibration. Most called it madness. Some called it genius. He called it kindness. For centuries, he was ignored. Prophets with clearer sight saw more immediate threat. Hive fleets, Monkey incursions. Ilranus stood at the edge of these debates like a shadow behind the flame, always silent, always listening. Only once did he speak. There is a sound that comes after knowing. No one listened, not then, but when the spiral began, appearing not just on walls or skin, but inside visions, the others started to fear. At first, it was mistaken for recursion, a loop in the timelines that could be corrected through interpretation. But it wasn't a loop. It was a hole in seeing. When the first seer tried to read the path beyond it, she vanished. Her robes remained. Her staff fell to the floor. But her spirit stone darkened, not blackened, not shattered, just dimmed, as if nothing had ever been stored there at all. The others assumed psychic backlash, a warp anomaly. Another reached deeper. He died mid, his mouth open, eyes locked on a future no one else could see. A third saw nothing, but afterwards, she couldn't stop screaming. Not from pain, from exposure. Her mind flooded with reverse memories, events that had not yet occurred, already grieving their own repetition. Then came the convergence, a conclave of 20 Farseers, summoned from the outermost fragments of the Craftworld diaspora, gathered at the Temple of Echoed Thought, aboard Craftworld ID, not to prophesy, to warn. Each had seen fragments. Each had lost something: voice, vision, lineage. One arrived in a sarcophagus. Another arrived without memories. Ilran has arrived last. He said only this: "You are not seeing the future. You are being seen by it." And they understood. The spiral was not a symbol. It was an eye. Not one that looked outward. One that looked back. Perception was the infection, and prophecy was the vector. What came next was not agreed upon. One Farseer began laughing. Not mockery relief, of course. It was always coming for us first. We saw it. Another collapsed, hands over his eyes, muttering that his ancestors had been erased from his spirit stone in the last hour. One rose and walked to the flame of memory, an eternal psychic torch used to preserve ancestral thoughts, and with no hesitation, pressed her face into it. She burned, but not from fire. From removal. She did not scream. She faded. Her name left the minds of all gathered, even as they wept. They could not name her. And then the first knife was drawn, not in violence, in mercy. Farsia Thalan cut a thin line beneath each eyelid and whispered, "To blind ourselves is not retreat. It is sacrifice." Ilranas placed a hand on his shoulder. It may already be too late. But one by one, they followed. Not all, but most. Some used knives, others burned their vision through rune exposure, staring directly into the pattern of refusal. A psychic lattice designed to collapse under scrutiny. It did, and so did their sight, but not their minds, not their souls. In that blindness, they found clarity, for the spiral had been tracking observers, not participants. It fed on awareness. To name it was to trace it. To follow it was to be followed. The Black Library closed for nodes that night, not because of security, because the data threads inside had become recursive. Fractal loops that spoke the same phrase in infinite dialects. You should not be reading this. Craftworlds across the stars received broken transmissions, fragments of warnings. Desperate echoes, half-formed runes, smudged across sensor arrays, but all of them carried the same image. A burning eye, not physical, not warps, a metaphor unbound from metaphor. Ilranas returned to Semnaya in silence. He walked directly to Elial. She was drawing the spiral in condensation on a bulkhead. She turned and asked him, "Did you see it?" He answered, "I heard what you saw." She nodded. "That's safer." He knelt, and for the first time in 1,000 years, he placed his hand over his own sealed eyes. "They're trying to see through us now. The paths aren't collapsing. We are." She touched his hand. "You can't close what was never opened." And he knew. Then, the spiral wasn't just watching, it was learning. Through them. Every prophecy spoken aloud gave it shape. Every warning gave it volume. So they chose silence. The remaining Farseers who had not burned their eyes began to disappear, some by choice, others not. But the pattern was clear sight, became signal. To see was to serve, even unwillingly, even unknowingly. Ilranas spent his final days walking the length of Semnea, in silence, laying down echo psychic blanks, emotional suppressants. places of stillness where the spiral could not root. He did not leave a message. He did not name the threat. He simply stopped walking. One day, he froze mid-step. His body remained, but he was not there. Not dead, not gone. Just unwitnessed, and thus, safe. The Farseers left behind now dream only in texture. No images, no symbols. Their thoughts are cloaked in silence. They speak in vibration. They write in weight. They do not see the future. They feel it press against them, and when it does, they weep, not for what is coming, but for what is already here and sees them. There is a Craftworld that does not name itself anymore. Its sigil has been painted over in ash, its heraldry dissolved in pigmentless vapor. Once it was known. Once it sang. Now it drifts through void beyond the light of stars, moving slowly through a corridor of silence carved, not by time, but by forgetting. Here, the Eldar do not pray for salvation. They pray for residue. The shrine halls stretch longer than physics permits. Corridors loop back on themselves without echo. What once were storage decks have become saints. What once held weapons now hold memories. Every surface bears offerings not to gods, not to ancestors, but to moments. A strand of hair wrapped in silk. A single note from a harp no longer played. The smell of a name spoken long ago and left to decay in quiet air. They do not weep. Their tears have already been archived out. Each Eldar carries a fragment, not a keepsake, a reminder, a shape that anchors them to memory, not of what was, but that something was. A smear of paint that once meant color, a weight in the hand where a soulstone used to be, in the center of the ship. The core gallery pulses with residual light, not power. Remembrance. Here, the bone singers do not sing to shape. They hum to stabilize, low, wordless tones. They do not build. They maintain decay. To allow the bones to fall apart too quickly would be to accept the forgetting. So they slow it, mournfully, dutifully, like caretakers of a corpse too large to bury. There is no longer a seer council, not because it was dismantled, because there are no futures left to read. Prophecy has become a wound, and so they dress it with silence. Instead of runes, they carry sand. Instead of staffs, they walk barefoot, so they can feel the slow erosion of their path beneath them. Each chamber is a vigil. Each breath is an act of protest against non-existence. A young ranger kneels before a cracked mirror, whispering to her own reflection, not out of vanity, but because she can no longer recall the faces of her kin, and the mirror at least offers an approximation. Her words are not names. They are attempts at names. On the deck once used for training aspect warriors, the floor is marked with concentric circles. They gather here, not to spar, but to recreate memories through movement. A gesture, once part of a dance. A stance, part of a hunt. But they do not strike. They remember the motion of striking, the ritual of what it meant to prepare for war, even if they no longer remember the wars themselves. Above them, in a garden long wilted, an autarch sits among dead flora, writing prayers on fallen petals. She sets each one adrift on currents of air, pulled artificially through the dome. Like a false wind meant to simulate seasons, they've forgotten how to count. None of these prayers ask for intervention. They ask only that someone, somewhere, someday, might remember that there was once something here worth forgetting. Because if no one remembers, what separates a people from a mistake? One chamber holds a map, not of stars, of feelings. The chart glows dimly with the emotional residue of places the Craftworld once touched: joy above Biltan, shame near Camorra, regret in the ruins of a shattered Exodite outpost. The map is updated, not by observation, but by ache. If the ache fades, so does the light. A corner that once shone with rage is now a quiet gray smear. The bones no longer hum, they ache, and the ache is not directed. It is not towards the spiral. Not towards Slaanesh, not even towards the fate they tried so long to escape. It is longing for witness. Even Al, the girl who dreamed in reverse, now walks slowly among these halls. She no longer speaks. The spiral has stopped appearing in her wake, not because the threat is gone, because even the spiral has slowed, as if running out of memory to devour. She carries no icon, no prophecy, only a bowl of water each day. She places it in a new chamber. Each day, the water ripples though no air stirs it. They say it is the sound of a memory trying to escape. In the farthest chamber, sealed behind layers of psychic insulation, sits a single wraithbone seed. It does not grow. It does not pulse. It remembers when touched. It releases not visions, but questions. Do you recall your first breath? Did your mother speak your name? Did your blade carry purpose? What was your purpose? Why does it feel like none of it was real? Some who touch it laugh. Most weep. A few simply lie down and never rise again, not in death, in final resignation. Because if you are forgotten before you end, did you ever begin? Even the homunculi do not come here. Even the harlequins do not dance here, because there is no narrative to mock, no arc to invert. The story has ceased. Only its echo remains, growing fainter, grain by grain, in the last hour of their long vigil. They do not call to gods, they call to possibility. They gather in the central atrium, no longer able to form a circle, too few left. They place their fragments in a pile, names etched into nothing, paint faded into fog, sounds no longer they burn them, not to destroy, to release, because fire still remembers, smoke still carries, and if the last breath of a people rides that smoke into the void, perhaps somewhere, something will breathe it in and wonder what was lost, or perhaps not. Perhaps silence is all that remains, but even then, they will have remembered trying. The ship has no name. Whatever sigil once adorned its hull has flaked away. Not through battle, not by erosion, but through disuse like a dream forgotten it drifts past stars that have long since died. No nav beacon pulses, no psychic signal reaches. Its path is not a journey. It is a remainder. Inside, a child sits in silence. Not a Lyle, that name belonged to someone else. In some other time, in some other memory. This child has no name, because there is no one left to speak it. Her robes are simple, patternless, unadorned, frayed not by time, but by purpose. In her lap rests a memory stone. It does not glow. It does not hum. It is not cracked. It is complete, yet holds nothing. She turns it slowly, watching the way non-existent light fails to catch its surface. Once, such a stone would have sung with the weight of a soul, vibrant with lifelines and thought echoes. Now it is inert, not because the soul is lost, because the idea of it has faded. Around her, the ship makes no sound. Its systems still run. Air circulates. Lights flicker. But they do not function. They continue. Continuation is not survival. It is a kind of forgetting made mechanical. There are no spirits of the machine. No ghost helms in the command deck. Only automated pulses looping through old routines, movement without destination. Life without direction. Form without meaning. And yet she remains. No one told her to. No one can. She does not speak. There is no language left to form the shapes of what she carries. The words Eldar, Craftworld, Seer, Sword, Spiral, they do not return when summoned. They are holes now. Empty syllables. What? She remembers her feelings. A hum in the bones. A question that unasked itself. A mask with no mouth, smiling into silence. She walks through the ship as if through a cathedral, long after. The gods have stopped listening. Each room she enters feels smaller than before, not in size, but in significance. In one chamber, a mural of stars remains half-painted. The brush lies fossilized beside it, its tip fused to the floor. The stars resemble none she recognizes, or perhaps all of them. It doesn't matter. The mural does not depict, it remembers, but not well. In another room, a harp of crystal strings hangs above a pool of black water. She touches it. The strings do not sing, they shudder, not with sound, with absence, like they remember being music, but cannot recall why. The child kneels at the water's edge, looks down, her reflection flickers. Not because of light, because something else is trying to remember her. The water begins to flatten. The spiral appears, not drawn, not carved, just present, reflected in a surface that no longer reflects. She closes her eyes and opens them again. The ship is gone. No walls, no deck, just space. Not void, not warp, not real. A room of maybe, a space of almost. She stands within it. In front of her, fragments, not ruins, not corpses, remnants of context. A piece of a wraith blade, still humming with an oath that never got spoken. A sliver of runestone etched with a prayer no god survived to hear a half-step of a war dance, eternally frozen in the memory of what might have been grace. A whisper, you were never meant to end, only to fade. She turns. No one is there. Just a sensation of reading. Not her reading a book, but the universe reading her, and deciding not to erase, but to unwrite. The difference is subtle. Erasure leaves a gap, leaves no proof a gap ever existed. One is removal, the other is refusal. The spiral blooms beneath her, not drawn, not burned, simply recognized. It expands outward, swallowing sensation, folding texture, peeling back the concept of persistence. She holds the memory stone tightly. It begins to flicker, not with power, with question. If no one remembers a people, were they ever a people? If no story is told, was there ever a voice? If the last fragment forgets itself, does the void celebrate or mourn? She kneels, gently places the stone into the center of the spiral, and speaks the final truth. We were. The spiral pauses, just briefly, and in that pause echo. Not survival, not victory, but proof that there was once resistance, once existence, once witness, even if now, UNWITNESSED, even if now gone. The room fades, not into dark, not into light, but into non-continuance, a silence that will never be broken, because it was never formed. A story that ends, not with a closing line but with a blank page where the book should have been, and the memories where it once sat, now a single fleck of light, drifting in a void that does not believe in memory. Not glowing, not pulsing, just present. The only thing left that doesn't need to be remembered, because it already was.